Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my beautiful hot messes. My name is MISTRESS Lavender, and welcome to my YouTube where I read. Today we're reading The Happiness Advantage by Sean Anker. We are on page 11. Let's just begin. If you want to support the channel, go ahead down below as all my other information and all my other content, and like, comment, and subscribe. Let's start. And I have a pencil just to underline any words I do not know. True. There are psychology. How am I messing up already? It just started. True. There are psychology researchers out there who don't just study what is average. They tend to focus on those who fall only on one side of average, below it. According to Ben Sharper in Happier, this is the second mistake traditional psychology makes. Of course, the people who fall below normal are the ones who tend to need the most help, to be relieved of depression or alcohol abuse or chronic stress. As a result, psychologists understandably have spent considerable effort studying how they can help these people recover and get back to normal. Valuable as such work is, it still only yields half the picture. You can eliminate depression you can eliminate depression without making someone happy. You can cure anxiety without teaching someone optimism. You can return someone to work without improving their job performance. If all you strive for is diminishing the bad, you'll only attain the average and you'll miss out entirely on the opportunity to exceed the average. You can study gravity forever without learning how to fly. Extraordinarily, extraordinarily as late as 1998, there was a 17 to 1 negative to positive ratio of research in the field of psychology. In other words, for every one study about happiness and thriving, there were 17 studies on depression and disorder. This is very telling. As a society, we know very well how to be unwell and miserable, and so little about how to thrive. A few years back, one event in particular really drove this home for me. I had been asked to speak at the Wellness Week at one of the most elite New England boarding schools. The topic to be discussed: Monday, or eating disorders; Tuesday, depression; Wednesday, drugs and violence; Thursday, risky sex; and Friday, who knew? That's not a wellness week, that's a sickness week. This pattern of focusing on the negative pervades not only our research and schools, but our society. Turn on the news, and the majority of airtime is spent on accidents, corruption, murders, abuse. This focus on the negative tricks our brains into believing that this sorry ratio is reality, that most of life is negative. Ever heard of medical school syndrome? In the first year of medical school, as students listen to all the diseases and symptoms that can befall a person, many aspiring doctors become suddenly convinced that they have come down with all of them. A few years ago, my brother in law called me from Yale Medical School and told me that he had leprosy, which even at Yale is extremely rare. But I had no idea how to console him because he had just gotten over a week of menopause and was very sensitive. The point is, as we all see throughout this book, what we spend our time and mental energy focusing on can indeed become a reality. It is not healthy nor scientifically responsible only to study the negative half of human experience. In 1998, Martin Siegelman, then president of the American Psychology Association, announced that this was finally time to shift the traditional approach to psychology and start to focus more on the positive side of the curve. That we need to study what works, not just what is broken. Thus, positive psychology was born. Going hungry at Harvard. In 2006, Dr. Tal Ben Shahar asked if I would serve as his head teaching fellow to help design and teach a course called Positive Psychology. Tal was not yet internationally well known. His best selling book, Happier, wouldn't be published until the following spring. Under the circumstances, we thought we'd be lucky to lure in 100 undergraduates brave enough to risk a hit on their transcripts by foregoing a credit in, say, advanced economic theory for one in happiness. Over the next 2 semesters, nearly 1,200 Harvard students enrolled in the class. That's one to every six students at one of the most hard driven universities in the world. We quickly began to realize that these students were there because they were hungry. They were starving to be happier, not sometime in the future, but in the present. And that they were there because despite all the advantages they enjoyed, they still felt unfulfilled. Take a moment to imagine one of these students. By age 1, many were lying in their cribs wearing a onesie saying bound for Harvard and maybe a cute little Yale hat in case something terrible happened. Since they were in pre kindergarten, which in some cases they were enrolled in even before being conceived, they were in the top 1% of their class, and then the top 1% of those who took standardized testing along the way. They won awards, they broke records. This kind of high achievement was not just encouraged, it was expected. I know one Harvard student whose mother would keep every handwritten exercise and restaurant placemat drawing he ever did because this is going to be in a museum someday. That was a lot of pressure on me, mom. And then they got and then they get into Harvard, walk confidently into that Hogwarts like freshman dining hall on the first day of college and have a terrible realization. 50% of them are suddenly below average. I like to tell my advisees, if my calculations are correct, 99% of Harvard students do not graduate in the top 1%. They don't find that joke very funny. With so much pressure to be great, it is no surprise to find that when these kids fall, they fall hard. To make matters worse, this pressure and the depression that follows pulls people inward, away from their friends, families, and social supports at a time when they need the support most. They skip meals, shut themselves in their room or the library, emerging only in the occasional kegger, and then in an attempt to blow off steam, they get too drunk to enjoy themselves, or at least remember enjoying themselves. They even seem too busy, too preoccupied, and too stressed to reach out for love. Based on my study of Harvard undergraduates, the average number of romantic relationships over 4 years is less than one. The average number of sexual partners, if you're curious, is zero point 0.5 per student. I have no idea what zero point 0.5 sexual partners means, but it sounds like a scientific equivalent of second base. In my survey, I found that among these brilliant Harvard students, 24% are unaware they are currently involved in any romantic relationship. What was going on here was that, like so many people in contemporary society, along the way to gaining their superb educations and their shiny opportunities, they had absorbed the wrong lessons. They had mastered formulas in calculus and chemistry. They have read great books and learned world history and became fluent in foreign language, but they had never formally been taught how to maximize their brain's potential or how to find meaning and happiness. Armed with iPhones and personal digital assistants, they had multitasked their way through a storm of resume building experiences, often at the expense of actual ones. In the pursuit of high achievement, they had isolated themselves from their peers and loved ones and thus compromised the very support systems they so ardently needed. Repeatedly, I noticed these patterns in my own students who had often broke down under the tyranny of expectations we place on ourselves and those around us. Brilliant people sometimes do the most unintelligent things possible. In the midst of stress, rather than investing, these individuals divested from the greatest predicator of success and happiness, their social support network. Countless studies have found that social relationships are the best guarantee of heightened well being and lowered stress, both an antidote for depression and a prescription for high performance. But instead, these students had somehow learned that when the going gets tough, the tough get going to an isolated cubicle in the library basement. The best and brightest willingly sacrifice happiness for success because, like so many of us, they had been taught that if you work hard, you'll be successful, and only then, once you are successful, you will be happy. They had been taught that happiness is a reward you only get when you become partner of an investment firm, win the Nobel Prize, or get elected to Congress. But in fact, as you will learn throughout this book, new research in psychology and neuroscience shows that it works the other way around. We become more successful when we are happier and more positive. For example, doctors put in a positive mood before making a diagnosis show almost 3 times more intelligence and creativity than doctors in a neutral state, and they make accurate diagnoses 19% faster. Optimistic salesperson outsell their pessimistic counterparts by 56%. Students primed to feel happy before taking math achievement tests far outperform their neutral peers. It turns out that our brains are literally hardwired to perform at their best, not when they are negative or even neutral, but when they are positive. Yet, in today's world, we ironically sacrifice happiness for success only to lower our brain success rates. Our hard driving lives leave us feeling stressed, and we feel swarmed by the mounting pressure to succeed at any cost. I'm going to stop there. I'm on page 15, starting at listening to positive outliers. So the more will be the next sentence. Thank you so much for joining my reading YouTube. Again, my name is Mistress Lavender, and I'm also known as the Phenom Dictator. If you want to support this channel, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe, and turn your post notifications on. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Bye.